Hi, everyone. Um, my name is Esme Avila, and I'm the Water Conservation Coordinator for the City of Avondale. And this is our second landscape class of the winter season. Last week, we had the vegetable gardening class. So if you missed it, I have some information. If you'd like me to send it to you, just leave me a note in the chat. And then, so today we have Kirti Mathura. I'm going to let her talk about all herself. It's because she has so much, such a large, extensive background, and I don't want to miss anything. So today we are going to find out how to attract pollinators to our garden. And as a matter of fact, I just saw some hummingbirds the other day in my chuparosas. So
oh yeah,
I'm excited. Yeah, excited for that. And yeah, so let's go ahead and start. And Kirti, tell us all about what you do.
right. Thank you, Esme. Well, welcome everybody, and hope everybody's had a good day. It was a little bit warmer today, which is nice for me. I'm a desert rat. So I grew up in the Midwest in Michigan and started gardening from a very young age, and was always interested in nature and especially pollinators. That's followed me all along to Arizona. So I've been working with desert plants here, oh golly, for over 30 years in our Sonoran Desert environment. And we have so many wonderful opportunities to use some incredible plant materials in our yards that can really lure in and accommodate and meet the needs of a lot of different pollinators. We have so many pollinators around our area, and active pollinators basically throughout the year. So always a nice thing to have those, in your garden and helping bring color and joy. Now, I usually do this class in a little bit more extended time. So this evening, I'm going to run through information quite rapidly. You do have, I don't know, Esme, were you able to get that handout emailed to people? I know it was short notice.
I'm going to put it in the chat box so they can just click on it.
All right, excellent. You can follow along with that handout then, and you'll have all the plant names on the handout, as well as a lot of information, even a little bit more detail than we'll really be able to touch on this evening. So hopefully in about an hour, I want to show you as many examples as I possibly can, and most likely we won't be able to get through all of them, but you do have that list. And there is a wonderful resource. AMWA, the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, has put together a wonderful booklet that has most of the plants that we'll cover this evening. It gives you information about their mature size, their bloom season, and so forth. Pardon me. And also, even better is their website. When you visit their website, you can get more photographs of the plants.
There's a book.
Pardon?
I said, I was just showing everyone the book.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. That can give you a better idea of the plant, different attributes when you can see more photographs of it. And that website has the additional feature, you can enter parameters to meet your needs in your landscape. And that can be used as a filter to help you narrow down your list of potential plants that would be of interest to you. I do encourage you to visit the AMWA, amwua.org website, and just play around with that feature And they have so many other great informational sources on their website. So with our different pollinators, and when we refer to pollinators, sometimes people just think of, bees. Bees pollinate things. They certainly do. But there are a pretty wide range of creatures that do help pollinate plants. These days, I think it's very important that we try to kind of make accommodations for our native wildlife by trying to include at least some of our native plants in our yards. Doesn't have to be all native plants by any means, but just some of those that they've evolved with can sometimes best accommodate their needs. So we want to look at different categories, and some of them have different needs, but overall, if you have a wide range of material in your landscape, you can accommodate a wide variety of pollinators through basically the entire year. Pollinators need basically the same things that we do. They need food, water, and shelter. When we talk about food, we are, there we go. Thinking sometimes it might be nectar for hummingbirds. Some people do like to use feeders. Pardon me. But I think when we choose plants that can offer nectar and have a wide range of plants that are providing nectar throughout the year, that's even better at accommodating the nutrition needs of the hummingbirds and any of our pollinators. So, and plus I'm a lazy gardener, so I prefer not to have to keep the hummingbird feeder or seed bird feeders filled. There's also the sanitary issue. So to me, it's just easier to have a nice range of plants to fill those needs of our pollinators. And you can see these are plants blooming at different times of the year that offer nectar to butterflies and hummingbirds. And it's very easy to make these accommodations. If you're interested in butterflies, you have to realize that for a butterfly to complete its life cycle, you have to lose some plant material. Once they lay their eggs hatch, and out come the caterpillars. The caterpillars, their only function in life is to eat. Sometimes I feel like I'm a caterpillar, but they eat plant material. Mostly this missing plant material will regenerate leaves that are damaged or totally eaten. The plant will be able to pump out a new flush of foliage, usually in just a short period of time. So it's not very common that caterpillars feeding on plants would totally decimate and kill a plant. But I think some of these caterpillars are just as colorful and interesting as the adult butterflies that we might enjoy in our gardens. Water. There are different needs for water. Certainly, keeping clean. Hummingbirds love to take water baths. Some birds might take dust baths. You might have noticed doves and things that would kind of scratch around in the soil and kind of scruff around taking a dust bath. Hummingbirds love water for bathing, and they also need water for drinking. You can have different water sources. These are sources that are pretty shallow, so you have to keep on top of keeping them filled. And this one is just filled, with a bucket of water or a hose, probably every day. It's so shallow, particularly during the warm season. Here's a very ornate Talavera style bird bath that contains water. This bird bath has, it's kind of hidden here, but there is a little spaghetti tube, irrigation tube running up one of these branches of this tree. and then it arcs over so it drips into the basin of this bird bath. So it's not necessary to refill that all the time with a hose. The stone that you see here, this is for safety. Some animals, they might get into a bird bath, and even though it's a very shallow amount of water, it's like human babies, you know, they can drown in just, you know, an inch of water. So it's nice if you have a source of water that's more than an inch or so deep. It's nice to have something to kind of hop up on if an animal is in danger. So you see here, they've put these bricks in this large saucer-like form that has the water for the animals. And this one, that is filled periodically from an irrigation system running about 1 minute a few times a day when it's the middle of the summer and it's so hot. That's just a shallow pot saucer that you have with your potted plant containers. So it is filled automatically, but it's so important to keep water sources clean. So every other day or so, this was in where I used to live in my yard, I would flush it out really well with the hose to make sure that that water stayed clean to be healthy for the birds that were coming to access the water there. And you notice there's stones here, even though it's a shallow saucer, I put some stones there so that birds could easily, hop onto those if they were needing an exit. One thing I do want to mention for your pollinators, if you are supplying water, a water source, then make sure it's consistent and year-round. If you are the type, if your habit is to leave the valley for the summer, it might be better if you don't have somebody who would keep your water source continuous while you're away. It might be better for you to not have a water feature. It's kind of, cruel to get some of these pollinators dependent upon having a water source in your yard. And then all of a sudden, especially when it gets hot and that water is really critical, to have it just disappear. So think hard about that if you are gone for extended periods of time at any time of the year, but especially summer. Now, pollinators, all of these creatures need some sort of shelter. Their shelter needs will vary. The best thing to do is to have layers in your landscape. You see here, there are low plants and plants ranging all the way up to tree height. That gives serves all the needs of different creatures to have the type of shelter that they need. And types of shelter might change throughout the day for individual types of pollinators. Here's another example. The low plants, and then you've got some that are kind of medium height that you see, and finally the tree canopy. So you've got these layered plant materials that offer a wide range of shelter opportunity for different pollinators. Shelter might be needed for nesting. We have here the hummingbird, and in this situation, they chose one of those Texas mountain laurels. They will use different plants for their nest building. I think they just find a spot that they like and create their nest there. Nesting for, mating. That's kind of, sorry, we were being a little intrusive, I guess, looking at that. Shelter for continuing and finishing life cycles. This is the underside of an agave leaf, where this monarch had the caterpillar crawled to the lower surface of this leaf and started forming its chrysalis there. And here we see the adult emerging. Shelter can include perching for taking a rest during the day or overnight. this hummingbird, for some reason, hummingbirds seem to love dead branches on desert willows. I don't know what the attraction is, but I got scolded really, really strongly once when I removed a dead branch from my desert willow. I was like, whoa, sorry, I wish I could glue that back on. But they really seem to like those. They will take opportunities to perch and take a little rest where they can see, they can view their surroundings to ensure that they're being safe, and probably just because they're nosy, they want to know what's going on. This is another habitat. If you have a large enough property and you lose a tree or a large shrub, if possible, you might want to leave that. You will have a succession of different insects and other creatures that will begin to decompose, break down that dead tree. And that succession of different insects can be a wealth of food for different pollinators. And all kinds of creatures. Woodpeckers especially love, they will just peck on branches where they can sense that there are insects in it. So it can be a really good source of food for some of our different pollinators. It's important to keep these pollinators safe. There are sometimes a need for having an application of a pesticide. Maybe it's an insecticide. Sometimes people use herbicides to kill weeds. Just be aware of the effects that those products can have on what we would consider non-target organisms, creatures that aren't intended to be affected by those products. So even though some people might find the cabbage loopers or tomato hornworms undesirable because of the damage that they might cause to some of our vegetable crops, when you're using a product that is overall pretty safe, such as this Bacillus thuringiensis, if it's not used very carefully, this product will kill caterpillars. It won't just kill caterpillars of what we might consider the bad ones, the loopers and the tomato hornworms, but it can also easily kill the caterpillars of more desirable, beautiful butterflies. So even something like this, it's organic and we think of it as being pretty harmless. It doesn't affect bees, but it can affect the larvae or caterpillars of some of those creatures that we might want to have in our landscapes.
Kirti,
Yes.
Back to the shelter.
Yes.
Oh, what do you think about birdhouses? Do you think they're okay, or are they too confining? Or
no, some people really like to offer birdhouses, offer that housing, birdhouses, bat boxes, things like that. I think they can be a really wonderful thing, but just as with a hummingbird feeder or a seed feeder or a water feature, you always have to think of sanitation and make sure that you keep that birdhouse clean. Once the occupants have reared their young, the little birds have fledged and they're off, then make sure that you clean it out well before another bird comes to utilize that. I think it's great because some of these organic products, they can affect beneficial insects as well as pollinators, depending on what it is, even if it's an organic pesticide. I think the best thing is to try to really limit or totally eliminate the use of pesticides, chemicals, and depend on natural cycles. Usually you'll have beneficial insects, those that will eat or kill bad, harmful insects. usually within a few weeks, if you have a problem, they will show up in your landscape and, you know, start in on that population control. So sometimes it's just a little bit of patience and allowing them to do their work. Also lizards, if you have those in your neighborhood, you might want to make your garden safe for them. So they'll come in and they eat a lot of insects every day, as well as you might even end up with a little toad resident. They'll come out at night and eat loads of insects, as will geckos also. Looking a little bit at the needs of hummingbirds, they are, you know, consistently feeding pretty much all through the day. They need that nectar, a good source of it. I think if you can arrange your plant palette very strategically, you can have nectar available for hummingbirds every day of the year. It's really not very difficult to do that. Here we have a Lycium fremontii. This hummingbird is visiting all these little flowers and sipping the nectar. And here, this is a tuberosa. Wasn't it a tuberosa, Esme, that you said you had the hummingbirds visiting?
Yeah.
Here's a tuberosa. Yeah. When they're in full bloom this time of year, I can imagine these hummingbirds approach them and just think, oh my gosh, which flower do I go to first? Kind of a frenzy. They will just go from flower to flower to flower, collecting that wonderful nectar. Butterflies, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are nectar feeders also, having a nice range of the nectar providing flowers available for them. Now hummingbirds, they will visit tubular flowers, long tubular flowers, even short tubular flowers. Butterflies, they don't hover like the hummingbirds do when they feed. So butterflies have to have what we refer to oftentimes as a landing pad. They have to land, have enough room, something to land on, and then they will start sipping. This type of flower configuration where you have, hundreds of little tiny individual flowers in a cluster is ideal for butterflies. They can land there and then just, in one sitting go from flower to flower to flower to flower to flower.
Is this the sweet acacia or?
This is actually, it used to be an acacia. I do have a picture of this later on.
Okay.
It's a guajillo.
Guajillo.
Very
Okay.
similar in looks to our desert fern tree. But this tends to be more evergreen if you're in an area that's a little colder. This will tend to keep its leaves through the winter even, and has just a dynamite bloom that's super sweet.
Yeah, the sweet acacia is the yellow palms.
Yes, right. But it's another great one for butterflies.
Oh yeah.
So, here we have nectar for a queen from a milkweed plant. These are just a few of the different, butterflies that might visit you. So some of them are very, very colorful. Others, they have a little bit more of a subtle pattern and coloring to them, such as with this Texan crescent. And these are one of my favorites because they're so cool looking. Snout noses. Look at that. They have this extended feature looking like a big snout. And they are kind of muted in color, but I think just fascinating to watch them. Looking at the life cycle, as I mentioned, an adult will lay eggs. Eggs hatch and out come the itty bitty teeny tiny infant larvae or caterpillars. Their whole thing is for a period of time, they will eat. Now, their skin can't stretch very much, so their exoskeleton, which is like our skin, their outer coating, once it gets tight, they shed that, and that's referred to as molting. So they will eat, molt, eat, molt, eat, molt. It depends on the species as to how many cycles of that they go through. But then finally, when they get to be a mature caterpillar, they will then form a chrysalis. This is referred to as the pupa or pupal stage. From this will emerge our next adult. So that's probably a refresher from what, way back in high school or junior high, the life cycle of a butterfly. But it's good to remember that so that you're thinking in terms of accommodating the different stages of the life cycle. To show you here, teeny tiny little, this is a queen caterpillar that just recently hatched. And so this one has molted a few times and is probably getting to the stage where it will start to pupate. Here you can see literally how they crawl out of their old exoskeleton. This caterpillar here had just crawled out not too long ago out of this exoskeleton. You can see here it just kind of, you know, split a little bit and crawled. The caterpillar crawled out of it. Sometimes they might be a lighter color when they first emerge from that molt, and they'll get a little bit darker. Sometimes they kind of change colors with each molt, which can make it confusing to try to identify these caterpillars if you're not real familiar with them. But they just, you know, chowing down. Even if you don't see the caterpillars, probably you will see their calling card, droppings, poop. Those caterpillars, they're eating a lot of plant material, so they're also excreting a lot. If you want to be a more scientific, you can call it frass, but I think probably most of us just call it poop. So we want to accommodate their life cycles. With your butterflies, they need, they're ectotherms, they don't heat their bodies themselves, so they depend on ambient temperatures. Therefore, especially in the cooler months of the year, you need a nice sunny location for the butterflies. Sometimes if it's cool in the morning, they just are hanging out, not active until the temperatures start to warm up sufficiently. So having some open space with good amount of sun is important for your butterflies. If you have a really shaded garden such as this, which is so comfortable for us during the summer months, it might not be the best for your butterflies for the activity, especially if it's a little cooler part of the year. Also, butterflies can't function if it's really windy. They weigh nothing. So if it's really windy, they have no control over where they're going if they're trying to fly. If you are in an area, if you have a lot of heavy wind coming through your yard, it might be a good idea to create some kind of a windbreak. You can easily do that with a selection of plants. This is one that is just lightly pruned a couple times a year. This is one of the hot bush. So it's a nice one that not only does it break the airflow there, can be a screen, and also you see these seeds developing, can be a great source of food for some of our seed-eating birds. Just a range of flowers that are great for butterflies, remembering that they need some place where they can land and sip nectar from these flowers. So especially when you see these composites related to the sunflowers or clustering, tiny little flowers clustered like this, they're ideal for your butterflies. There are some butterflies that do have a long enough proboscis that they can take advantage of nectar in more elongated tubular flowers. Usually these are more accommodating for hummingbirds though. But this one, it has a lip just big enough that that butterfly could kind of hang on to that perch there, as well as this one. But usually these shorter clustered flowers or short tubular flowers are easier for overall the range of butterflies. This is a magnificent garden. This is spring, probably I'd say around March here in the valley. A range of perennial flowering plants that just have an explosion of color, but also nectar for the hummingbirds and butterflies. The color doesn't totally go away. The nectar doesn't totally go away though. Some of these perennials are quite long blooming as opposed to penstemons that only bloom for, maybe 4 to 6 weeks in the spring. So keep that in mind, the length of the bloom time and different cycles of bloom, so that you've got that range of nectar throughout the year. Here, a nice fairy duster with some little perennials that are warm season blooming. It's so easy to put together combinations that will be offering nectar through a wide period of time. Another spring photo where we have a nectar from this wonderful ground cover dahlia and these some annuals as well as perennials. And we have the firecracker penstemon here, great for the hummingbirds, the desert marigolds, and the poppies, the annuals. Those are great for bees especially. Another garden setting where you have a range of perennials and annuals mixed in there during the spring is just an explosion of color, as well as just a dynamite source of nectar and pollen also, which is, pollinators. We're encouraging these insects and birds and creatures that when they're visiting the flowers, whether it's to get the nectar or some pollen themselves, they will in one manner or another be taking pollen to another flower to effect pollination of our plants. Now, water for the butterflies, they don't go for the bird bath, that freestanding water. They are needing minerals that are within soil and surfaces like that. So just a puddle, mud. Here, this is a garden that is covered with some chipped wood mulch, and with some recent moisture applied to that, we've got this butterfly visiting to puddle. This was just a wet sidewalk. So the butterflies, they'll sip the moisture off of these surfaces. Especially the males need minerals that are associated with the soil for mating, producing the sperm for, I guess it's not pollination with the butterflies, is it? But they don't go for standing water. So you could even just have a shallow dish with a little sand in it that you keep moist, and that would suffice for their needs. A lot of our butterflies will roost overnight. Some of them will group, others just by themselves will hang out, literally hang out in a tree or something like that. So this was a queen spotted early morning in the summer, had roosted overnight in a Palo Verde. Here we've got a butterfly that had roosted here in this crown of thorns. So remember, with your butterflies, that cycle to complete the life cycle, you have to have food available for the caterpillars. And these black swallowtails, they will just chow through fennel like nothing. But to me, it's okay, because I'm going to be able to enjoy the adults as well as these very colorful caterpillars, and I'm supporting their life cycle. It's the end of the season. I've used most of the fennel anyway. Here, the monarchs eating milkweed, leaves of different milkweeds, and these little clown looking, they look like jesters to me, eating our pipe vine. So that's necessary for them to complete their life cycle. The critical plant for monarchs is the milkweed. We have different species, a few different species of milkweed that we can grow here in our gardens, but they they have to have milkweed of some sort to complete their life cycle. Adults will visit the flowers of the milkweed, but the important aspect is they lay their eggs and then the caterpillars will feed on the milkweed, mostly on young leaves or flowers, flower buds. And if you're not already interested in them, there are some fascinating moths that will be active around dusk or through the night. This is a native white-lined sphinx moth. They are about the size of a hummingbird. Their movement is very similar to a hummingbird. They will come out at dusk and pollinate some of our native plants and non-natives as well. But it's just fascinating to watch them. Unlike the butterflies that have to land, these hawk moths, they do hover just like a hummingbird as they visit flower to flower to get their nectar. Also, they will visit the wonderful datura with these elongated tubular flowers. So they have a fairly long proboscis. There again with moths, you do have the caterpillars that munch plants. They will also, the adults have their specific types of plants that they will lay their eggs on. So you might want to do a little research to see which would accommodate those moths you're trying to have in your garden setting. And bats. Not all of us have bats in our area, but if you do, it's, I think, just fascinating to watch them as they come out in the evening and swoop around and eat mosquitoes and other insects from the air. Now, some bats are fruit eaters, some are strictly insectivores, just eat the insects. There are different species with different food needs. They are great pollinators for things like our saguaros and other night blooming cactus. And bees. So yes, you know, the honeybees, we want to accommodate them. We have so many different native bees though. Most of our native bees are what we call solitary. They individually, you know, create their nest, or they might be a few in a little colony, but you don't have the colonies like you do with the honeybees. So they have different favorite flowers that they visit. They will collect the pollen from these flowers in different manners. Some of them have hairs on their abdomen that the pollen sticks to. And then when they go to the next flower, as they're moving around, they will leave some of that pollen there from the previous flower to pollinate it. So you can see here on the belly, the abdomen of this one, it's just covered with pollen. So as it visits from flower to flower, it's helping pollinate our cactus flowers, the prickly pears and cholla especially. So here's some of our other native wildflowers, globe mallow, and this is one of the little fleabanes. And some of these native bees will overnight in flowers. Things like the mallows, they will nestle into the flower, and you can catch them when it's still a little cool in the morning. You go out and might be looking in the flower and oops, sorry, you're still sleeping. So it's, I think, pretty special. Some of our night blooming cactus are still full of, containing quite a bit of nectar the morning after they open. You'll have hummingbirds and bees taking advantage of that last nectar and of course the pollen that next morning. So those are also great for our different pollinators. Oops. Some of our native bees are terrestrial, ground nesting. So try to leave some areas where there's a little bare ground where they can develop these holes. They're about the size, the width of a pencil, and they just burrow down in, create their nests where they lay their eggs to complete their life cycle. So sweat bees are just one of them that will nest in this manner. Leafcutter bees, they are the ones who cut those usually perfectly round holes from leaves or maybe the bracts, the bright colorful parts of your bougainvillea. They are just collecting a few of those. You can see the bee here, and they're in and out, zip, zip, cutting these pieces. They will gather a few pieces and basically make a little cup structure that will be the holder for a little lump of pollen and whatever else they mix in. And they'll lay one egg, and then they'll go back out, get a few more pieces of leaves, and make another little nest cell. So you might find really elongated nesting cell clusters like this, but they're just like little stacked cups. That's what they use those leaf pieces for. Carpenter bees, oh my gosh, they look so menacing. They're big, but they're big and clumsy, kind of like myself. I think they're so fun to watch. They are some of the gentlest creatures, you know, that gentle giant concept. They are also helping pollinate. Sometimes they're given a bad reputation because if flowers, tubular flowers aren't large enough that they can fit into, they will drill holes in the side and sip nectar, but not help with pollinating. But they are out there helping pollinate some of our various plants. So here you see, you just get the butt view of these, but they're down there helping pollinate some of these squash plants. And it's, you know, kind of a lineup right there that morning. Honeybee after the carpenter bee. They will drill their holes into wood. Generally, it's not our house structure wood. They do not favor wood that is treated or painted. So usually your house structure is safe, but other wood, they will drill holes in there, and that's just where they build their nest. So you can see this one, its wings are beating, I don't know how many RPMs, but they will just drill these holes, lay eggs in there. And one species that we have, two species here in the desert. One species is, the female is black and the male is this kind of a blonde color. The other species, both male and female, are black. But I think they're just fascinating. For bees, here again, we're talking about housing. You might want to help the bees out with some kind of a structure. Different species of bees need different sized holes for their nest. This post has a range of hole sizes drilled into it. Here somebody just turned a pot on its side and put these old wood blocks in there with the holes drilled in them. This is an artist from down in Tucson. He gathers old wood and repurposes it for a lot of just beautiful garden art bee homes. You can see the holes here. A lot of them are filled, they're active. The housing is taken up there, but a range of bees will occupy these, and some of those you can see just stacking even little bamboo shoots into a cluster can be a nice little bee nesting house as well. Bees, they don't like the standing water in the bird baths. They also, like the butterflies, like to take up moisture with the minerals. So this is the side of a fountain. This stone feature is the top of the fountain, and the water that's spilling down, they'll go on the kind of the outskirts of that and sip the moisture and the minerals that are coming from this stone feature here. So they kind of similar to the butterflies. They don't like that standing water. So now let's dive into some plant examples with a little bit of time that we have left. I just wanted to make sure though that you understand that different pollinators, they will have different needs as far as shelter, types of shelter. They will have different needs as far as water sources, different needs as far as food also. So this bee brush, yes, it accommodates bees. Through the warm season, it produces these very sweet smelling, tiny little white or cream color flowers that they're just little short tubes, but they hold sufficient nectar that they will be visited by bees, but also butterflies and hummingbirds. You can look at this, 3 different species of butterflies right here visiting this one bee brush. So this is going to be quite a large scale shrub. So blooms throughout the warm season, as I said. And the added benefit is once those flowers are pollinated, the oodles of seeds that's produced will accommodate seed-eating birds also. The desert hackberry is a great shelter for different wildlife, but the little tiny flowers, you really don't notice those, and they're not the big part as far as pollinators. Fruits are more visible. Have fruit-eating birds come gobble those up. But the desert hackberry, it's one of the larval food plants, a plant needed by some of our native butterflies for the caterpillars to develop on. So eggs are laid and they will munch the foliage on this plant. So that's the pollinator aspect, in addition to all those other wonderful aspects of the desert hackberry. Desert willows are long blooming all through the warm season with these magnificently gorgeous flowers that very often have a lovely light kind of floral scent to them, especially in the morning. These tubular flowers are perfect for the hummingbirds to visit. And if you give your mature, established desert willow a good soaking about every 3 weeks or so during the summer months when we haven't gotten sufficient rain, you can keep it in bloom nonstop through the summer. If you go maybe 4 to 6 weeks in between waterings, it'll probably have kind of downtime with the bloom. Then when you give it a good soaking again, it'll perk back up into another bloom cycle, but it doesn't bloom as consistently when you have that extended period between the irrigations. And you can see they can just make lovely canopies within a landscape. They are winter deciduous, so you can get nice warm sun coming in the winter, and then the nice shade during the summer with the aspect of these gorgeous flowers. And not only hummingbirds, these are usually large enough flowers that the carpenter bees can get in there and get nectar also, and other bees, native bees. There are a range of flower colors also, so you just have a wide selection of desert willows that you can choose from. And just remember, if you do have a dead branch on your desert willow, be observant, and if a hummingbird frequents that as a little perch for resting, then I would recommend don't cut it off. Be safe. Don't get scolded. Here we have a Texas olive, blooms through the warm season with these lovely white flowers that are about 2 to 3 inches in diameter. This is one that is great for the white-lined sphinx moth. Remember, they'll visit those flowers around dusk and through the night, and they are just so lovely, gorgeous, gorgeous, and very interesting. Little side note, this is not an olive, but gets the name because the fruit that develops after pollination of your flowers looks a little bit like an olive. The Duranta, the sky flower, is another good source of nectar for a range of creatures. This gets to be quite large shrub, great in full sun, even though it looks quite tropical. The most common color is this kind of sky blue flower. My favorite is the darker colored sweet memory. But they're all favored by butterflies and hummingbirds and bees. You can even get some that are white flowered. If you have a little bit of a shade, those white flowers will stand out better than the darker colored flowers. After pollination, you have fruits develop that are good for fruit-eating birds. But this is one of the visitors of the sky flower. This is one of my favorites, these skippers. I think they're so adorable. They just, to me, they're like the teddy bear of the butterfly related world. They're just cute. You just want to hug them or, you know, rub their little furry cheeks. You can see just perched here. It's an ideal situation having those clusters of flowers. You can perch and just sip the nectar from various flowers. And if you can focus your eyes, here is a hummingbird visitor. So good and long blooming all through the warm season. Kidneywood is an excellent kind of small statured tree, great for butterflies. You have a big bloom in the spring and usually a smaller, at least one smaller bloom or two during the monsoon season if we get some good rain. The guaiacon is wonderful with these electric purple flowers. They begin blooming a little bit later in the spring, around late April or May. When they do begin blooming, you'll have pollinator bees visit and butterflies will visit the flowers also. These will have cycles of bloom through the summer. Lovely dark green foliage. They're generally evergreen with this electric purple flower, but wait, there is more color. The pollinated flowers develop in seeds that are encapsulated in this little structure. It's kind of, it ripens to a golden color. That splits open and you have these bright orangish red seed that are encased in this little structure. It's called an aril. Everybody remember that for your plant trivia game that you next play. Inside the actual seed's really dark brown, but you can have another cycle of bloom occurring when you have the seed ripening. So you can have the dark green foliage, the purple of the flowers, and the gold and the red, and all these just magnificent colors in your garden that are accommodating butterflies and bees. Our native desert lavender is a great one. Oftentimes these have an open, airy growth habit, but you can do some very careful pruning to encourage more dense branching. These will have blooms in cycles through the year, especially in the spring, you'll get loads of blooms. They're tiny, but you can notice that these, at the leaf nodes here, you'll see clusters of these flowers and you'll have cycles of these through the year, especially if we get a little rain. These tiny flowers will attract bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. And once these flowers are pollinated and they drop from the plant, this structure called a calyx remains. And sometimes hummingbirds will collect these calyces to line their nest. It's nice and soft and also nice fragrance, that lavender-like smell. So there it's accommodating the nectar needs of the hummingbirds as well as nesting needs sometimes. The different wolfberries or thornberries that we have, they're all great with their small flowers, usually at least 2 cycles through the year, accommodating bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. And then the fruits that develop after pollination are great for fruit eaters. So you can see hummingbird visiting the flower, the butterfly, and just a side note, sometimes during the summer when it's really hot and dry, songbirds finches will strip the leaves off of these stems. So they're getting the leaf and that moisture that it carries, but then they'll leaf back out very rapidly. Now here's the desert fern with its magnificent spring bloom. Very nice fine texture, very soft looking in the garden. Nice small to medium-sized tree. Spring, it is just covered with these cream colored puffballs that will accommodate a wide range of bees and butterflies especially. So here's the one that I showed earlier. Very similar looking to that, the desert fern, but it is more cold hardy, And here you can see lots of activity. Here's a honeybee. We've got different butterflies here. Very, very fragrant. Also sweet smelling is the cat claw acacia. These just gazillions of clusters of kind of a cream color flower. These are elongated clusters, not the round puffballs, but they are great for butterflies. And then we're also accommodating seed-eating birds after pollination. So these flowers, heavy flowering in the spring. You might get a little bit more during the monsoon season, kind of late summer, if we get some nice rain. The yellow bells are great. They bloom all through the warm season. And we have, we started out with the main yellow bells and just a few different other types. These days we have so many hybrids and cultivars that are available, some of them smaller in stature, oranges, more red colored. So a wide variety of these. All of them are wonderful, providing nectar for hummingbirds especially. Just good dependable nectar sources throughout the warm months. And just beautiful foliage that's quite tropical looking. The vitex or monk's pepper tree or chase tree has a magnificent bloom, kind of mid or late spring, that will attract bees and butterflies, sometimes hummingbirds. The flowers can be, they're most often a lavender color. They might be available in pink or white, depending on the nursery. Lots of butterflies love these. And this is just a really, I think, intriguing butterfly. The wings have some interesting patterning, probably to deter pests, kind of, that scaring the predators, making the predator think that you're bigger, maybe that these are big eyes watching them. But it's interesting that the hind wings will rotate back and forth on these hair streaks while they're feeding. They just kind of move back and forth. And this is another feature maybe that kind of scares predators away. You've got these little antennae looking like structures and these fuzzy things. So pretty interesting, but these are just lovely butterflies. So some shrubs blooming in cycles throughout the year is the Indian mallow. It's a native that is very drought tolerant, can go in full sun or light to moderate shade. It'll go through a cycle of bloom, produce seed, then go through another cycle of bloom, produce seed. So it's a nice one to have throughout the year. It's wonderful for a range of native bees, especially. Here's one you can see down in here. And the Indian mallow is one that, as well as the globe mallow, those two, very often you'll find some of our native bees will nest in the flower cup overnight. And it also supports, as a larval food plant, our Arizona powdered skipper, which is kind of a muted color, as most of the skippers are. But you lose a little bit of leaf material, that's okay. And eventually this leaf, it'll get a leaf to kind of pucker and curl around itself as it pupates. The flame acanthus is great for especially for the hummingbirds. There are some swallowtails that can access these flowers as well. But from around May through November, you'll have these blooms just, dotting all over the shrub. And as well, the relative, the Anisacanthus thurberi, is primarily a spring bloomer. I might get a little bloom in the late summer if we have good monsoon rains, but this flame acanthus will bloom nonstop pretty much throughout the summer, May till around October or even November. The woolly butterfly bush during the warm season has these clusters, these globes of tiny, deep orange flowers, great for butterflies. And also you get now and then some bees visiting the flowers. The The red fairy duster or Baja fairy duster, it has just dynamite bloom in the spring and in the fall, but usually through the wicked heat of the summer and the coldest part of the winter, usually there are at least a few flowers here and there. So this is one I'd say that you could find a bloom most likely on an established plant. You could find a bloom, if not many, on this plant practically every day of the year. It's just absolutely amazing. These flowers, this is a cluster of individual flowers. Here's one, here's another, and it's the male reproductive stamen that are giving it that bright, brilliant color. Even though those floral cups are very small, they hold sufficient nectar that this is great for butterflies, hummingbirds, and bees. You're accommodating all of those pollinators in one shrub, and they are just a great source of nectar. Our native fairy duster, which is smaller, pardon me, primarily as a spring bloom. You can get more in the late summer if we do get some summer rains. But same thing here with these clustered little tiny flowers. You'll get visitation by the birds, bees, and butterflies. And they just fit so well because of their smaller, more petite size. Fits so well tucked in here and there in the landscape. There are different species of dahlias. This is the smaller of them that we have available in the landscape industry here, the black dahlia, fall bloomer, September, October, November. These clusters of little pea-like flowers will attract bees and butterflies. So the different species, some of them are kind of fall, winter, others winter, spring blooming. So there are variations and definitely differences in sizes with these dahlia species. The brittle bush, it's a great one. That composite flower is great for the butterflies to land and sip nectar from each of these numerous teeny tiny little individual flowers. Great spring bloomer. And fall blooming is the turpentine bush. This will attract so many different types of butterflies that will just grace your garden September, October, November with that abundant nectar. Now these have to be grown in full sun to get this great full bloom. So I think we have a little Paula adorning our screen here. Maybe we could kind of not add more. The flat top buckwheat, great spring bloom and fall bloom with these clusters of tiny flowers. You get some butterfly visitation, and definitely this is a great seed source for seed-eating birds after the flowers are pollinated. And here's that tuberosa. These can start blooming around October and continue blooming through March, even through April sometimes. They are great with these tubular flowers, just an abundant source of nectar through the cooler season for the hummingbirds. Most common is this red color. There is also the yellow blooming form that is available from some of our local nurseries. And something like this Big Mama, this is it's a relative of the hibiscus, but this flower, this is as much as it opens. It's still great though. Hummingbirds can access the nectar. There are even some species of butterflies that can get their proboscis down in, whoops, that structure. Well, here you go. Here's a cloudless sulfur visiting the flower to get the nectar. And don't forget the rosemary. Rosemary is just wonderful. You'll have not only the honeybees visit the flowers like crazy, but also a lot of our native bees will visit the flowers of the rosemary also. So a lot of these are kind of winter, spring, or some fall, winter blooming. Just depends on the variety. And here you can see this little blue visiting that flower. We have autumn sage that is wonderful with a great spring bloom, great fall bloom, but if it's got a little bit of shade in the summer, it can continue blooming. If it's in a warm enough little sheltered spot, it can continue blooming through the winter. So it's a little similar to that Baja fairy duster where you might have blooms on this any day of the year, but the peak bloom would be fall and spring. There are a range of colors available with different growers, ranging from brilliant red or scarlet red to more pink colors and even white. The hummingbirds don't care which color it is, truly. Once they find your garden and see this, they will be visiting no matter the color on your autumn sage. For primarily fall blooming for us, it is possible if these are in a warm enough location that they don't really have any setback during the winter, you might get some spring bloom. Here in the valley, primarily though, we get this fabulous bloom in the fall around September, October, November with these pubescent fuzzy flowers. It's the craziest thing. Depending on the grower, some of them have a purple calyx and white petaled flower. Others have a purple calyx and purple flower. The leaves are pubescent or fuzzy also. Just a really cool shrub that is great for hummingbirds especially, and sometimes some visitation perhaps by butterflies. Oh, there we go. See, such as this Gulf fritillary or cloudless sulfur. And here we have our native globe mallow. This is the most common color, this kind of medium orange, just lovely. These are primarily spring bloomers and they can just be dazzling in the spring. There are also a good range of natural variations in flower color, from beautiful pastel pinks to even white or almost a fuchsia color, but they're all wonderful. This is a great one for bees, the flowers. The bees love the flowers. And I think this is a larval food plant also for somebody. My memory's a little clouded on that one, but definitely wonderful for our native bees especially. So there, and honeybees, they will visit those flowers as well. They're just so cute, these little tiny native bees. Look at that. So some bees, they've got the hairs that collect the pollen on their legs. Honeybees and some other of our native bees also, they will pack the pollen into specially structured hairs on their legs, but others, they don't do that at all. The hairs on especially their abdomen, will catch the pollen as they go from flower to flower. Here we have goldeneye. This blooms from early spring to late fall with these beautiful daisy-like flowers. Another great one for butterflies. They can land on the flowers and sip the nectar from all those different flowers, and it's another larval food plant also. And bees. Also, don't forget the bees. Perennials. This is a different species of milkweed. I've shown you the desert milkweed that's native right here to our area. This is native down towards Tucson. If you have a little bit of shade in your garden and you can give a really good top dressing of compost, good mulch around these plants, these will do very well here in the valley. These have leaves that they maintain throughout the year. They're long blooming, and both the monarchs and the queens just love these plants. But this is one that you have to have a little bit of shade. Desert marigolds bloom in cycles all through the year. And yep, you've got it with the composite flower form. The little skippers and other butterflies will visit those flowers. The chocolate flower, it's another one. That daisy-like flower is great for, here's a little pollinator. This is actually a little fly species. And here we have a checkered white. You can have a lot of activity with the flowers on your chocolate flower. So long blooming from spring on into the fall, sometimes even through November. The Caulophus is a long blooming spring through the fall with these lovely golden yellow or buttercup yellow flowers. It's also, so you get some visitation by bees, and this is a great one for our white-lined sphinx moth as a larval food plant. The mist flower is wonderful for a wide range of butterflies. There's my cute little skippers. But these are blooming kind of summer through the fall. Look at this. The queens go crazy over these. So this is a plant, it can spread some if there's moisture. It can spread some by underground runners. So if you let this go, you can get a nice patch and get this kind of effect in your own yard. It's so fun. And the night blooming datura, just remember, this is, the whole plant's toxic. So if you have kids or pets that are, tending to put things in their mouths, you don't want to grow this, but otherwise, it is a fabulous perennial that dies down to the ground during the winter. It disappears usually, then pops back up, and by early summer, then you'll start having these fabulous big trumpet-shaped flowers, lightly scented. They open, and they don't open at dusk. They open usually about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and they have a nice scent, and those our sphinx moths will really appreciate having one of these in your garden. Little Dicliptera is another one that blooms in cycles throughout the year with these almost pea-like flowers, not quite, but a little similar looking. And it's a nice one for bees and butterflies, sometimes visits by the hummingbirds. Our native verbena is just a must-have. It is tough as nails, loves the sun, drought tolerant, has a fabulous bloom, huge bloom in the spring that's really sweet smelling. If anybody's ever smelled petunias, petunias smell like our native verbena. Very, very sweet smelling. So butterflies will visit the flowers, even pollinator bees also. You'll usually get another nice bloom in the fall. This is a cool season bloomer. The Sonoran water willow, great blooming from around, usually they kick in by November and can bloom through April into May. Tubular flowers are fabulous for hummingbirds. They're great in full sun or very light shade. A wide range of lavenders will be providing nectar for bees and butterflies and hummingbirds. So most of these are spring bloomers, and they're super drought tolerant. They have to have a well-draining soil. They are super cold hardy also, except for one, the fernleaf lavender. This is one that starts blooming around October. If we don't get any cold snaps, it can still be blooming in April or May. It's not what you would typically think of as a lavender fragrance or flavor wise, but it is like so fantastic to have those months of nectar for the hummingbirds and the butterflies and the bees. And this is the type of visitation that you'll get. We've got, range queens and just all kind of, painted ladies. Everybody visits those. The Blackfoot daisy, sweet smelling flowers, blooms through most of the year, and you get nice visitation by the butterflies. The 4 o'clocks, they open at 4 o'clock, well, at least by late afternoon. The flowers are open through the night, so this is a good one for those sphinx moths. White-lined sphinx moths will frequent these flowers, as well as the tufted evening primrose. These open in the evening, and those bright white flowers reflect even the slightest bit of moonlight through the night, but you can enjoy the flowers and those sphinx moths. And it's a great larval food plant for that white-lined sphinx moth also. This is what I was mentioning. Sometimes when you have the molts from one stage of development to another, you might have quite a range of colors with your caterpillars. So this is, these are all white-lined sphinx moths that are very, very colorful. The one penstemon that we have that blooms during the summer is the rock penstemon, great for the hummingbirds. And the firecracker penstemon blooms mostly from around February through May or June. And the other wide range of penstemons, the Palmer penstemon and the Canyon penstemon, the Perry penstemon, the superb penstemon with that beautiful coral color. These are spring bloomers. So maybe around February, March, April is the main bloom season for these. Any of the penstemons are great for the hummingbirds. If you have a little shade, the red salvia, which is not always red, you can find these with a range of pink colors or even white. But this is a good one. Don't put these in the sun. They'll require too much water. But in the shade, these are great. And they will bloom almost year round also. Hummingbirds will love you for planting some of these. Here's another hair streak. It's not really visiting though for the flowers. The desert senna is a larval food plant, and especially you have the sulfurs. Visit these, they'll lay their eggs, and then the caterpillars develop. You can see here, these that are brighter yellow, they've eaten more of the flowers. Those that are a little bit darker are eating more of the leaves. Kind of interesting, huh? And Rodney's aster is a fall bloomer that will bring in so many different types of butterflies. Skippers, painted ladies, sulfurs, a wide range. Mexican tarragon is, or I prefer Mexican marigold. It's actually a marigold plant. This is a fall bloomer that will be visited by a range of butterflies as well. And here you have that. There's a skipper with the fall blooming Mexican bush sage that will attract the butterflies primarily. So you can come up with wonderful combinations. This golden fleece blooms through the summer. It will attract, with these small little daisy-like flowers, a wide range, especially of these little skippers. And here's the blue visiting this. And I'm going to zip through a few more plants and then we'll have a few questions. So for some vines, the queen's wreath is a great one. Bees love these flowers. They bloom from around midsummer, usually through October, with these brilliant colored flowers and adorable heart-shaped leaves. There are different species of pipe vines. This is one from Argentina that does well here. These support the pipe vine swallowtails. Their larvae are the coolest looking. The flowers on the plant are usually just kind of really odd, cool looking flowers. They range from one species to another. This is our native pipe vine, the Aristolochia watsonii, with these kind of arrow-shaped leaves. If it's grown in some shade, the leaves are greener. It can be grown out in full sun. The leaves take on more of kind of a maroon color. The flowers are more narrow than the previous species, still funky looking. And here you have the eggs are these bright orange little spheres. The eggs hatch and these tiny little caterpillars will start munching away. So your butterflies or your moths, they're going to lay their eggs on the plants that they know their young need to feed to be able to complete their life cycle. They don't just lay their eggs anywhere. So they'll eat molt, and finally pupate, and they will form, they don't just hang from their hiney, their tail end, they attach to a plant on their hind end, but also make a sling-like structure. And then they will start to transform into their pupal form. And like other swallowtails, they have these little structures that they'll shoot out, look like little orange horns that have an odd odor to help deter threatening creatures. And this is what they look like as the pupal stage. So we have the chrysalis of the monarch and the queen. These look very different. They look like dried leaves. Even within the species, you can find different colors. I don't know how they do that, but I've seen, ranges of green to orange to kind of a, to tan to kind of an orangish color. Now, the trailing smoke bush is a great ground cover, super drought tolerant, sun worshiping, has flowers like that black dahlia. Another good one for the butterflies and also the pollinator bees. The passion vines, the different species, are great. They all have a slightly different flower, but all funky looking like this. And the different species, this is a large flower, smaller flower on the Passiflora arida or the Baja passion vine. This blue passion vine has a large flower and it's open through most of the day. The Baja, those flowers close early in the morning. But these are necessary for the Gulf fritillaries. Looks kind of like a burnt orange on the upper wing, but when the wings fold, you see these designs, they look like silver painted on the leaves. They lay these eggs, they hatch, and then these cool caterpillars start developing, and they are spiky. They will eat molt. So this one, it's crawling out of its old exoskeleton there, and their heads even pop off. Sorry, lost my head. So they're very tender for a short period of time. They're very susceptible, very vulnerable, I guess I should say, because they don't have that more kind of hardened exoskeleton yet. See, you can see here the old head that popped off. It's just fascinating, I think. And then after after the last molt, then they will start to pupate like the, pardon me. So they will attach to a structure from their hiney and hang kind of in a J form. And their pupal case also looks like a dried up leaf. So that's the Gulf fritillary. And unlike the pipevine swallowtail, they had two attachments to their structure. This just hangs from one attachment. And see, carpenter bees, they're important pollinators, I'd say, for the passion vines. Look at all that pollen on its furry back. Pink trumpet vines, great ones for the hummingbirds and the carpenter bees. And the fruity germander, it is long blooming spring on into the summer. Great for a range of butterflies, especially my favorite little skippers. And bees. The native sunflowers are wonderful seeds for the seed-eating birds, the finches, but it's a larval food plant for that bordered patch. They look menacing, don't they? They're so cool, but they turn into a butterfly looking like this. Different milkweed species. The pine leaf, it seems a little tricky to grow in the valley, but some people are very successful. This one, the desert milkweed, this is the one it's native to right here in our region and so easy to grow. The main thing, you just have to have it in full sun. As I've said, it will support the life cycle of both the queen butterfly and the monarch.
Yeah, and do not cut it like a grass.
No. Then the caterpillars, they eat the leaves that come on this, develop only on new growth, and then they'll drop. So they're not there for very long. Here you can see they're just thread-like. So caterpillars will eat the leaves. They'll eat flower buds, flowers, and the real young pods that are still green and tender before they start to harden. But these this milkweed blooms all summer long. So if you lose a few buds or flowers, no big deal, you're gonna have more. And also you get another pollinator, the tarantula hawk wasp, favors these desert milkweed flowers. They are just awesome.
I had never seen that before.
Yeah, they love the desert milkweed, and usually they're paying attention to their business, but if they do feel threatened by you, if you're, messing with them, I've heard that is one painful sting that you do not want to.
No, they look kind of menacing.
Yeah, and of course, our saguaro night bloomer that in part of its range, the bats will pollinate these. Otherwise, you'll get some other pollinator help. The birds, the hummingbirds especially, will visit these flowers, and the bees in the morning though, see there's a bee with the nectar that's still left there, and they can help pollinate also.
Cool.
And both from Mexico, the tree ocotillo and our native ocotillo are wonderful for our hummingbirds. The different hesperallos, there are quite a few of these. We think mostly of those pink blooming, but this giant hesperallo has a lovely, like 15-foot tall stalk with these cream color flowers that the hummingbirds will visit just as frequently as they do the flowers on these red yuccas or the yellow red yuccas. We've got all these cactus that bloom. I showed you examples of the prickly pears, the flowers that the bees visit, but we will have night pollination of things like the organ pipe, and also in the morning, hummingbirds can visit those flowers. And the yuccas, generally yuccas, there are a couple of specific species of moth that generally do the pollination on our yuccas. And grasses, these are great. Grasses are an important larval food plant for various native butterflies. So don't forget to include some of our Southwest native bunch grasses. So, any questions?
There was, well, let me see, they had a question on the birdhouses, and let me see, we covered that. There was a question, well, somebody commented that he had great pictures. So, and they were awesome. There was a question, is there a push from you or the city of Avondale to educate commercial landscapers to stop chopping blooming shrubs every month? So it's a perfect segue to your Smartscape program.
Yeah, and that's so important to really accommodate our pollinators. We need all those flowers on our plants. If they're continually getting sheared off the plants, we're not supporting our pollinators. It's just as simple as that. So if you hire landscapers, make sure that they understand that they're not supposed, they're not allowed to shear your shrubs or cut back your milkweeds like crazy. Help educate any knowledge that you have, pass it on to them, and that they might know better, but they get so caught up in having these expectations by a lot of their clients who don't know and understand plants. So if you educate them and let them know that, let's change things a little bit, that can really help get us on a better path to maintenance of our desert landscapes.
Awesome. Sharon Bill said she registered for Smartscape. So there you go.
Yay!
All right. So we lost a few people. They had to leave, but they said that was great presentation and great pictures. So they got the handout that you provided. So hopefully if they have any questions, I'm sure they'll contact us.
Great.
And then also we let them know the website. So thank you.
Thank you. I know
there.
it was loads and it was crazy, but
Oh.
I just wanted to kind of get you exposed to as many plants for the pollinators as I can.
Of course.
So thank you all.
Of course. Thank you so much. And Megan says thank you as well. So I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but that I'm letting you know that everyone appreciates your presentation. So, and your time, especially me.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the 21st if you're wanting to join us. We have a fruit tree class. So.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I've attended that one.
Yeah, we're not in person.
Jonathan?
Yeah. Otherwise, we could taste some of the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So, well, thank you, Kirti, and we'll be talking soon.
Great. Thank you.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.